So you worked in the free market for a while.
Yeah, and then the way it works here is that you are invited to stand in a seat that you have no chance of winning.
Okay.
No chance. And the idea is you get tested. The party is looking at you. Can you handle a campaign? And if you can't, well, you're not going to win the seat anyway, so it's not too much of an embarrassment. But so there's competition. So I ended up fighting a seat in Worsley, which is just west of Manchester. And first time ever, I went to see Manchester United play at Old Trafford, and it was fantastic. And so I really enjoyed that, but there was no chance. It was a deep old Labour, it was a mining town. And Terry Lewis was his name, and he was so delighted that I was there. But I was just one of about 8 wannabes.
You were cannon fodder.
Exactly, and so he was very sweet. He was very friendly, but he knew that it didn't stand a chance.
Let me ask you another question. We've done a number of different podcasts talking with different psychologists on the concept of capability assessment and personality assessments. Do they do that in political parties? How do they? I'm assuming you get a mentor. Do they do some kind of personality or capability assessment? How do they pick future candidates for politics?
So there is a selection weekend, which is actually based on the military one that we have, the Regimental Commissioning Board.
Yeah.
And it's now it used to be a couple of days when I did it. It's now just one day. But they do an assessment, and they check to see whether you know the right stock, whether you've got experience, if you've been a councillor before, that always helps, what your general interests are. They're testing you as to whether politically you are in the right party, and what your motivations are.
Do they check for ethics?
They checked that as well. Will you sign something to say, yes, I'm a good egg? But a lot of these don't come out until later, do they?
Yeah.
So that they do all that. Unfortunately, the training beyond that is very, very limited. I mean, we're both familiar with the armed forces. You take anybody who's a captain, a major, a colonel, a brigadier, or a general, and there's no way that they could advance to the next rank unless they did some exams, unless they excelled themselves, unless somebody wrote some good
uniformity of standards, uniformity of training. I mean, there might be some slight variations in the training, but if you look at in the military, this is I've had some other military people on my podcast, and we've talked about this. I think this is where the military really has a leg up on private industry, because they'll challenge you. They'll give you more responsibility than you ever thought you would have at a certain age. But they'll never leave you alone, and there's always a standard, and there's training that's involved, and there's a continual 360 feedback loop in the process as well.
I'd agree with that, and actually to some degree in Civvy Street, also in the banking communities and so on, you're only going to get there, and if you are required to go somewhere, they will ship you out on a course.
Yeah.
I dared because when I got into politics, I got elected in 2005. I wanted to make my arc of interest defense, security, geopolitics, the international stuff. And I went to the whip's office and I said, listen, there's this great course at Harvard on national and international security. Any chance that there's some money available that I can go and do this to make me a better person if I become a minister, which I eventually did.
Yeah.
And he looked at me, his good friend of mine, Alistair Burt, he said, what? The taxpayer pay for MPs to go out on courses? You've got to be kidding. Even though Britain would benefit by me being a better decision maker, understanding things and the connections. Now, sadly, I lost my brother in the Bali.
I read that. My condolences. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got some inheritance from that. He was a teacher, head teacher in the international school in Saigon, and I got some inheritance from that. And he was a facilitator to get the best out of other people. And I thought, what better use than to use that money to do the very course. So I went to Harvard and using that money. And I honestly, and what was really curious is that when I turned up there were civil servants from Britain. So the taxpayers' money was being used for the advisors inside the Foreign Office and the MOD, Ministry of Defense. They shipped people there, but MPs would not be allowed to go there.
Interesting.
So we have this bizarre system whereby you could be the Secretary of State for Defense, never done the ROTC, never worn the uniform in anger, certainly never even been in the Scouts or anything else like that. But somebody likes you. The whip's office say, well, why not? And then you become, in charge of a thumping department like that. And it is wrong. And that has happened so many times.
Yeah.